Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over the recommended raid deck for the Earthbound Immortal raid. What can I say? It's just too good! So yeah, we have Elemental Hero Neos as our ace for this raid. So just be clear, Elemental Hero Neos does not need to be your ace for this raid. Your ace really should be whatever your best boss buster monster is. Whatever monster you have that's going to do the most damage to the boss. Stardust is good. Leviathan Dragon, which I actually have in the deck as well, is also good. The reason why I have Elemental Hero Neos as the ace, even though, like, you know, a free slot X-head cannon can do more damage than it, the reason why I have it as the ace is because sometimes you get games where the boss sends a raid monster down your lane, sometimes you get games where he sends multiple raid monsters down your lane, and even if you put a monster in defense mode, the boss has an ability that sometimes he can make monsters in the center lane switch to attack mode. So, you know, just to stop losing as much resources as possible, just to keep as much of my resources as possible, I have in Elemental Hero Neos, even if that means I don't necessarily get quite as much in that final round, and so far it hasn't really mattered. So, yeah, Elemental Hero Neos, brilliant ace. It is by no means necessary, and I feel like if you have a Stardust, you have a Black Rose Dragon, you have anything that is going to do a crap ton of damage to the boss, you can put that as your ace. Another good ace monster to put in is VWXYZ Dragon Catapult Cannon. I think this is okay even with one slot, because then if your assist heal monsters only have 2 slots, this will give them the 3rd slot. And it protects you against the raid monsters that the boss sends at you. You won't even need to put anything in the middle to protect them, because this can just protect them. You can set it in defense mode. If you take 1 hit, put it in attack mode for another hit. The only downside is I think you probably would need to include both of the double summon monsters, Dark Resonator, Hip Hippo, to get this out, and potentially even Stray Lambs if you have that, just as a way of getting this out as early as possible without impacting your other resources. So I think this one is also a good one to put out. If you have at least two slots in this, I think it will be very, very good, but I think it could still see good play at 1 slot. Apart from that, if you do include this in, I would definitely have in like 1 or 2 rare monsters with free boss buster slots, just so you get that damage out when you need to. Because one downside of having this in is you won't have your sort of damage dealing monster in your hand from the beginning, so you will need to draw it from the deck as the duel goes on, and you run the risk of not drawing it by the time you actually need to do damage to the boss. But I think this is a very good ace monster to have in if you don't have Neos. As for the deck itself, there is no way around this. You're going to need a lot. If you hope to beat the boss at level 15, you're going to need a good number of slots unlocked. Otherwise, he is going to be very, very difficult to defeat. Now, I do have in a free slot Bloom Diva, so this essentially gets a bonus as one of like the bonus cards in this raid. So it has kind of 6 in total when you summon it. This is really, it's good, but it's not necessarily needed because it does require a sacrifice to get out. So if you essentially have 2 monsters with 3 slots each, it's almost as good as just having this one. The reason why I say almost as good is the boss does have a raid skill in this mode, which is going to decrease the amount of life points that you heal from assist heal. So obviously the bigger the assist heal, the less you lose from it, which is why Bloom Diva is better than sort of having 2 monsters with like 3 each. But it's still, I do find myself running low on resources towards the end of this raid, so it's still, you know, not absolutely necessary, I would say. However, you do need quite the selection of assist heal monsters. First of all, I would recommend putting in, if you have them, any monster that is listed on the boss's bonus chart. I will put them up on the screen here so you can see what they are. All these monsters get a boost to their assist heal, so the rare ones get 1 additional assist heal, the super rares get 2 additional assist heal, and the ultra rares get 3 additional assist heals. So they're all very good, and I would recommend putting all of those in, even if you only have like one slot on them. As you can see here, my Trickstar Narcissus only has one slot, but it gets a +2 bonus, so it has 3. So we definitely recommend putting them in if you have them, because again, the more assist heal slots you have, the better. Apart from that, just any assist heal ones that you have free slots. And one thing I do have to stress is having free slots in this. You're going to find it very, very difficult in the later levels of this raid if you only have 2 slots. If you manage to find a really good group of players, it is possible that they can get you through, but it's going to be difficult. So I would definitely recommend trying to get as many as you can with free slots, especially the ones that are on that list. And ones that you don't have free slots, you can just click customize here, go to the plus button. I only have one duplicate of this card, but you can do trade cards. And I wouldn't recommend necessarily trading your extra copies of monsters because you never know when you'll need them, but you're bound to have tons of spell cards and trap cards, which you can just trade to get extra copies of that card in. Now, again, you know, I have a 2-slot assist heal there. I have 2 here. This one gets a bonus, but it's still like free. It could be more. I haven't, you know, it's almost fully decked out, but I haven't actually decked out absolutely every monster in here. But I'd recommend just making a deck with what you have, play in the raid, and then if you are having trouble, try to trade in some of your copies of spells and traps to get more copies of those monsters to get another assist heal slot. It is going to make a difference. It is going to be the only thing that gets you through these later stages of the raid. Although, if anyone does have any other strategies for getting through this raid, please feel free to put them in the comments below. But I still think that is going to be very tricky. I don't see how there is going to be other strategies to doing this other than just really loading up on assist heals. And again, I guess I should mention why assist heals. Well, the boss starts off with 1,000 damage. Every lane turns to an Earthbound lane, and then every time you do a set amount of damage, 2 of the lanes return to normal. And what this basically means is the boss powers up less at the end of each turn, because the boss's attack starts at 1,000 and then grows every single turn, dependent on the number of Earthbound lanes you have. So it's important to do as much, like to throw your best stuff out at the beginning to do as much healing as possible. Now, saying that, we do have in a couple of monsters with anti-object. We have Ojama Yellow, Ojama Black, Gravity Axe Growl, and that's basically it. We have 3 cards in for anti-object. I would have in at least minimum 3 cards for anti-object, including Gravity Axe Growl, possibly 4 if you're having trouble. The reason is the boss will put out objects, and these objects will prevent you from assist heal, or not prevent you from assist healing. These objects will reduce the amount of assist heal you get. So it is definitely important that you are able to deal with these. And Gravity Axe Growl is basically essential for this deck because sometimes this object will spawn when your healers are in that crossroads. And if you have a Gravity Axe Growl, even at the highest levels, you can get past that object by throwing a Gravity Axe, an anti-object on your monster. It also helps to have it so that if your opponent, or not your opponent, if your ally is in that same situation, you can throw anti-object on their monster and get in those assist heals. Because that is going to be the big killer of the run in this raid, is your monsters basically just blowing up on these objects and you not being able to take out these objects swiftly, because it is going to vastly reduce the amount of assist heal you have. For this reason as well, we also have Rod of Silence, so that we can get in that extra assist heal early on to decrease the amount of damage the boss goes up by. Yeah, that is really the deck. I do also have in Leviathan Dragon, which is basically for that final turn for attacking the boss if all else fails. It's also just a bit of a backup in case something happens to Elemental Hero Neos, which is very unlikely, but there are scenarios as he gets basically a bonus +3 assist heal. But what I will say is Leviathan Dragon, definitely not essential. Meliodas Diva, definitely not essential. Neos, definitely not essential. Just having your best boss buster monster. And if you don't have in these cards, or if you don't have various super rares, just try and get like as many rares as you can. See, there's still 2 rares that I haven't actually included in this deck. Just try and get all of your rares up to 3 slots and have them all with assist heal, and that should hopefully get you through it. Other cards that you may want to consider putting in: emergency teleport, because if you find yourself in that situation where your assist heal monster is about to attack and die on a object, you can emergency teleport it into your other lane so you don't actually lose the healing from the assist heal. And the only other one you might want to consider is Security Orb. The boss does occasionally throw down a trap on one of the side lanes to switch your monsters to defense mode. This one's a bit of a... you don't really need it. Maybe put it in if you are really struggling to fill out the deck. It very rarely actually happens to your monsters, and the next turn you can usually just switch them back into attack mode. But it may occasionally come up for if, you know, there's an object on a lane and he puts that sort of switch monster to defense mode on that lane. So then it will help you destroy that object. But again, I think this came up 0 times, for me at least. It did come up for people I was playing with, but this is very rare occurrence. Right, and that has been the deck. So now let's get into the duel.
Duel! Feast on the souls of the taken to gain the strength of the immortals. Descend upon this world, Earthbound Immortal Ccapac Apu!
So as you can see, this is actually very possible to do even with free AI allies helping you out. The boss doesn't do too many like tricky things that you need to make too much thought about, which is why the AIs are actually pretty fine to have in this battle.
There are no monsters coming your way, but what you do here is the true test of your skills.
So on our side, there is nothing for us to deal with, so we're just going to put out 2 of our sort of best healing monsters to attack. Now, one thing to note is there is that object in the top left corner, which is going to prevent healing, but thankfully the AI has put out an anti-object monster. Even if they didn't, they would lose both their monsters and the object would teleport somewhere else for the next turn. But at that point, even with just 2 healers, it should be easy enough to damage. I think one of the decisions that you may need to make in this raid is when to put out your better healer monsters compared to your healer monsters which are not as good. And this was definitely a time to put out some of the best healer monsters. So, the skill the boss has here at the moment is he will teleport your strongest monster into the center lane. And what I'm doing here is I'm just using Neos to bait that skill out. I don't want any of the healer monsters from the AIs to be put into the center lane. So I'm just currently using Neos to make it so that he is definitely going to get chosen to put in the center lane, and we're not going to lose any potential healing.
We're moving to the battle phase.
I activate my trap. Brilliant Shrine.
What? What's your plan?
And as I mentioned in the deck discussion, it's important to do as much healing as you can straight away, which is why I'm using the rods effect there.
They're moving.
If you're trying to annoy me, you succeed.
I'm also keeping that Ojama yellow in my hand for when the next object appears. Always good to keep at least, rather than putting it down and sacrificing it for Bloom Diva, I mean.
Nothing we can't handle. Go get 'em.
I activate my skill.
And we've done enough damage that 2 of the lanes are going to be removed of the Earthbound terrain, which means he's not going to get as much of a power-up as he usually does.
To your doom.
You'll pay for
Still 3,000 damage, but it could have been worse.
I summon a monster.
And here is one of the issues I was talking about. As you can see in the top right, the object is now in a lane where there are 2 healers that do quite a lot of healing. And this is a good opportunity to use, you know, that emergency teleport if you do have it. Unfortunately, it looks like those healers are going to die on the object.
We're moving to the battle phase.
I activate my trap. Limit impulse.
What's your plan?
And as the boss's other skill will change all the monsters in the bottom right lane to defense mode, this skill isn't too bad. It can be rather disruptive if the lane happens to be the same lane the object is out, but as it's only one lane and the object's only on one lane, this tends to be a rare occurrence. The only other way this skill can be bad is, I think, maybe later on in the raid when you're running out of resources and you may not have enough to heal to max and the boss is going to do a lot of damage. That can be a problem, but again, it's been pretty rare for me so far. But I guess just be wary of it just in case. Now, the boss is... the axe kind of one turn too late. Now, the boss's skill at the moment puts all the monsters in the center lane into attack mode. So that's why we're summoning Neos here. I'm sacrificing the Ojama because now that we have Gravity Axe Growl, we don't necessarily need to keep the Ojama to destroy the object that appears. And not just that, if the object doesn't appear over my side, we can use Gravity Axe to help out our allies.
Go get 'em. We're moving to the battle phase. What's your plan?
The nice thing about summoning Neos here as well is that he will do a little bit of damage to the boss, meaning that when the boss does go into its stun phase, it won't be as hard to defeat the boss fully because he will have less health.
Go get 'em.
I have to think my skill.
Right, we've healed enough to remove 2 more Earthbound lanes, and we just need a little bit more healing to finish them off. And this is where I think usually the difficulty will come in on the raid. This is where, as you can see, all of the AI have used up all of their resources. I've got a Bloom Diva that I basically can't summon, and this is, this is where doing that last little bit of healing is really going to matter. Now, as the object is on my side, I have put my Moki Moki down there. I actually decided not to do Bloom Diva just because I wasn't sure if the AI was going to sacrifice his monster or not, and I would end up losing my Bloom Diva.
What's your plan?
I also couldn't put out Neos to bait out the boss's skill, but thankfully he only took a sort of boss buster monster, which wouldn't have done too much healing anyway. So it all worked out, but this is definitely the stage of the raid that can become very, very difficult. Getting down that last little bit of health from the boss. And this is also why it's all the more important to make sure you do destroy those objects. Because if I hadn't, if those objects that we had encountered so far hadn't been destroyed, we would have a lot more healing to do, and quite potentially not be able to do it in the 2 turns that we have left.
No monsters coming your way, but what you do here is the true test of your skills.
So here I'm finally putting out my Bloom Diva. As you can see, Bloom Diva, isn't definitely not necessary. It may have actually been more helpful in this raid to have, 2 free slot rare monsters with healing. But I think Bloom Diva is still, even if you have it with just 1 slot, I think it's still a good card to have in if you are struggling to fill out those slots for your other assist monsters. Anyway, this should be the final round of healing.
I have to think my skill. That's the spirit.
And at this point, we are just attacking for our most, putting out our monster that does the most damage.
It's the main phase of the 7th turn. It's leaving itself wide open for attack, as if it's not scared of us at all. It's starting.
And I'm putting out my monsters anyway, even though I don't need to. If by some miracle the boss doesn't die in this phase, then you will need more healing monsters to go out to, take him down more in the next turn or 2. So, yep. I guess just be wary. Even if you think you're going to beat him, just put down all your monsters anyway, just so you're potentially ready for the turn after.
You healed up. This is great.
And there you have it. So this is a pretty easy raid in terms of what you need to do to actually beat the boss. There's not a whole lot of decision making involved, but there is a bit of a gap in what you need monster wise in order to actually beat this boss at the higher levels. Anyway, hope that helped. Subscribe to the channel for more cross-duel content, and I will see you on the ladder.